The crystal chandeliers above Vivian's dining table cost more than most people's cars. I knew this because she'd mentioned it 3 times during appetizers. The anniversary dinner was supposed to celebrate 40 years of her marriage, but it felt more like a coronation. 23 relatives packed around mahogany that stretched the length of the room, everyone dressed like they were attending a royal wedding. I sat near the middle in my department store suit, trying to be invisible. Adrian married up, didn't he? Vivian's voice cut through the polite conversation like a knife through butter. Laughter rippled down the table. My wife, Celeste, smiled into her wine glass but said nothing. I mean, look at him. Still wearing that same navy blazer from our first Christmas together. What's that been, 6 years now? More laughter. My face burned, but I kept my expression neutral. This wasn't new. At every family gathering, I was the punchline nobody got tired of hearing. The accountant who married the heiress. The quiet man who somehow convinced their golden daughter to settle. Then the waiter appeared at my shoulder holding a silver tray. On it sat a single cream-colored envelope with the bank's logo embossed in gold. "Mr. Adrian Colewood," he said clearly. The room went silent. "This arrived for you an hour ago. They said it was urgent." Every eye turned toward me. The envelope seemed to glow under those expensive lights. I stared at the envelope, my name printed in bold letters across the front. Not Mr. and Mrs. Colewood. Just my name. Adrian Colewood. Sole recipient. Vivian's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Well, Adrian, aren't you going to open it? Banks don't make mistakes after all. If they sent it here, it must be important." I looked at Celeste waiting for her to tell her mother to stop. Waiting for her to say that maybe this wasn't the right moment. Waiting for her to defend me just once in 6 years of marriage. She tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear and looked away. That hurt more than every joke, every dismissive comment, every time they treated me like I was lucky to breathe the same air as their family. The woman I loved couldn't even meet my eyes while her family turned my private business into dinner entertainment. "I'll open it later," I said quietly, tucking the envelope into my jacket pocket. "Oh, come on," Julian, Celeste's older brother, chimed in. He was already 3 glasses deep into the wine. "What's the big secret? Did your community college finally process your diploma?" The table erupted in laughter again. Even Celeste's cousin, who barely knew me, was grinning. Felt small. Smaller than I'd felt in years. But I didn't open that envelope. Not then. Not for them. Some things weren't meant to be shared with people who only wanted ammunition. After dinner, I excused myself to the hallway, needing air that didn't smell like expensive perfume and casual cruelty. I was studying the family photos on the wall, generations of wealth staring back at me, when Julian appeared. "Adrian." His voice was tight. "We need to talk." Turn slowly. "About what?" "About whatever stunt you're pulling with that bank letter." He stepped closer, his breath sharp with alcohol. "I don't know what kind of fake financial games you're playing, but you're embarrassing this family." I could have walked away. Should have walked away. But something in his tone, the way he said fake like he already knew the truth and hated it, made me stop. "The bank wouldn't address something fake to me by name," I said calmly. "They're pretty careful about that sort of thing." His jaw clenched. "Then what is it?" "I guess you'll find out when everyone else does." I walked past him back toward the dining room. My hands were shaking, but my voice had been steady. For once, I hadn't backed down. For once, I'd let him wonder instead of explaining myself into exhaustion. Behind me, I heard him mutter something under his breath. Sounded like a curse. When I returned to the table, dessert had been served. Some elaborate chocolate creation that probably cost $50 a slice. Vivian was holding court at the head of the table, telling a story about a charity auction where she'd outbid someone for a painting she didn't even want, just to prove a point. Then her eyes found mine. "Adrian, darling, you're back. And you still haven't opened that mysterious letter. I really must insist. It's rude to keep secrets at a family gathering." "Mother," Celeste said softly, But there was no force behind it. No real objection. No, Celeste. If a bank sends correspondence to a family dinner, it's clearly important. Adrian, please. Indulge us. Every face turned toward me again. I could feel the weight of their expectations, their certainty that whatever was in that envelope would be mundane, maybe even embarrassing. Proof that I was exactly who they thought I was. I pulled the envelope from my pocket, broke the seal slowly. Inside was a single page on heavy paper stock. I read it once, then again. Then I looked up at Vivian. It's regarding an account, I said carefully. A private asset holding account. Requires sole authorization for any transactions or disclosures. The room went still. Not quiet. Like someone had pressed pause on all of them at once. What does that mean? Julian demanded. It means, I said, folding the letter back into the envelope, that the bank needs me to verify something in person. Just me. Vivian recovered first. She always did. That's what decades of social conditioning does. It teaches you how to laugh off anything that threatens your carefully constructed reality. Oh, that's probably just a clerical error, she said, waving her hand dismissively. These things happen all the time. I'm sure it's connected to Celeste's account somehow. Banks merge files, get names confused. Adrian, I wouldn't worry about it. I met her eyes across the table. Celeste's name isn't on the document. The smile on Vivian's face cracked just slightly. What? The letter. It's addressed only to me. The account is only in my name. Celeste isn't listed anywhere. Kept my voice even, factual. No emotion. Just truth. Celeste's fork clattered against her plate. Adrian, what account? What are you talking about? I wanted to ask her why she was surprised. She'd been there. She'd seen me working late nights, making calls, building something small but real. But she'd also watched her family mock those efforts for years and never once told them to stop. So maybe she'd convinced herself, like they had, that nothing I did could matter. We can talk about it later, I said. No, Vivian cut in, her voice sharp now. I think we should talk about it now. If there's some kind of account that involves this family's resources, we have a right to know. It doesn't involve your resources, I said quietly. It involves mine. The drive home was silent. Celeste stared out the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. We lived in a modest house on the edge of the city, close enough to her family's estate that they could drop by unannounced, which they did often. As soon as we walked through the door, she turned on me. Why did you hide this? Something this big. I set my keys on the counter, trying to keep my hand steady. I didn't hide anything, Celeste. I stopped explaining myself after the 50th time your family laughed at my work. There's a difference. That's not fair. You know how they are. They don't mean anything by it. Don't they? I looked at her, really looked at her. Your mother called me a charity case at Thanksgiving. Julian asked if I was still trying to play businessman at Christmas. Your father suggested I take a real job at his firm doing filing. And you sat there every single time and said nothing. Her face flushed red. I was trying to keep the peace. By letting them tear me apart. By not making everything about you. The words came out sharp, defensive. Then she softened slightly. Adrian, you know I love you. But you also know my family has certain expectations. Certain standards. I didn't want to put you in a position where you felt you had to prove yourself constantly. So instead you let them believe I was worthless. She didn't answer that. Couldn't answer it. Because we both knew it was true. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, remembering the day I'd told Vivian about my investment venture. Had been 4 years ago, maybe 5. I'd spent months researching, building connections, pooling every dollar I could save from my accounting job. I'd been so excited, so hopeful. I'm starting a small private equity fund, I'd announced at Sunday brunch. Focused on undervalued commercial properties. Small scale, careful growth. Vivian had set down her mimosa and smiled that smile. The one that looked kind but felt like a blade. How cute, she'd said. Adrian's playing businessman. That's adorable. Julian had laughed outright. Give it 6 months. These things always collapse when amateurs try to run them. Celeste had squeezed my hand under the table but said nothing to correct them. Nothing to defend the plan I'd worked so hard on. And now, 4 years later, that cute ambition had become an account substantial enough that the bank was sending formal correspondence to verify my identity. The venture they'd dismissed had grown quietly, steadily, exactly the way I'd planned. The bank letter traced directly back to that entity. Back to the business they'd mocked. Back to the work they'd said would fail. But they didn't know that yet. And I wasn't going to tell them until I was ready. 2 days later, my phone rang while I was at work. The caller ID showed the bank's number. I stepped into an empty conference room to take the call. Mr. Colwood, this is Patricia Reeves from Sterling Trust. We need you to come in for an in-person verification regarding account ending in 7743. Are you available this week? What kind of verification? Standard procedure for accounts of this classification. We need to confirm identity, review recent activity, and update authorization protocols. You're the sole account holder, so only you can complete this process. Only me, I repeated, more to myself than to her. That's correct. The appointment needs to be in person, and we can't proceed without your signature. I booked the appointment for Thursday morning. As I hung up, I heard a small sound behind me. Turned. Celeste stood in the doorway of the conference room. She must have followed me from the office lobby. Only you, she said, her voice thin. Adrian, what is going on? I'm handling something I started years ago. That's all. That's all. The bank is calling you for private appointments, and that's all you're going to tell me. You didn't seem interested in the details before, I said quietly. Then I walked past her back to my desk. That evening, Celeste went to her mother's house. She didn't tell me she was going, but I knew. She always went there when she felt like I wasn't giving her enough information, enough control. What I didn't know until later was that Vivian had called an emergency family meeting. Celeste, Julian, Vivian, and Celeste's father, Preston. The whole inner circle. And I wasn't invited. I found out because Julian sent a text to Celeste that she left open on the kitchen counter. Meeting at 7. Don't bring Adrian. We need to discuss this privately. They were planning how to handle me. How to manage the situation before rumors spread. How to protect the family's reputation. I stood in our kitchen reading words that confirmed what I'd always suspected. I wasn't family to them. I was a problem. Risk. Something to be controlled. I took a photo of the text message. Not because I wanted to use it against them, but because I needed proof. Proof that I wasn't imagining the way they saw me. Proof that the quiet dismissals and public jokes were part of something bigger. Something deliberate. They wanted me small. Manageable. Grateful. And I'd played that role perfectly. Till now. Thursday morning, I walked into Sterling Trust wearing my best suit. The one I'd bought 3 years ago for a presentation that never happened because Vivian had convinced Celeste we should skip it for a family trip instead. The advisor, Patricia Reeves, greeted me warmly. She led me to a private office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the financial district. Mr. Colwood, thank you for coming in. Have good news. Your account matured ahead of projections. One of your silent partners exercised an early exit option, and the buyout accelerated your returns significantly. I sat very still. How significantly? She slid a portfolio summary across the desk. The number at the bottom made my throat tighten. It wasn't millions, but it was more than most families saw in a decade. More than enough to prove that everything Vivian had dismissed as cute ambition had become something real. Congratulations, Patricia said. You've built something quite impressive. I looked at the number. I should have felt pride. Victory. Something bright and triumphant. Instead I felt tired. So tired of fighting to be seen by people who'd decided I was invisible. I signed the verification documents without smiling. 2 days after my bank appointment, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Then I saw the name on my screen. Vivian Laurent. She'd never called me directly before. Ever. Adrian, darling, I was hoping we could have lunch. Just the two of us. There's a lovely bistro near the gallery I frequent. I'm working, Vivian. Of course. But surely you can spare an hour. I wanted to talk to you about something important. About family. I knew what this was. The meeting I hadn't been invited to had produced a strategy. And now she was executing it. The sudden warmth. The personal attention. The invitation to talk about family, like I'd ever been treated as part of it. What did you want to discuss? Yes. Well, Celeste mentioned you've been handling some financial matters recently. I thought perhaps we could talk about managing family assets together. You have such discipline, Adrian. I've always admired that about you. She'd never said anything remotely positive about me in 6 years. Now suddenly I had discipline she'd always admired. I appreciate the offer, I said carefully. But I'm comfortable managing my own affairs. There was a pause. A crack in her polished exterior. Adrian, family means supporting each other. Surely you understand that. I do understand that, I said. I'll talk to you later, Vivian. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking. But I'd said no. Gently. Firmly. Without explanation or apology. Felt like breathing for the first time in years. That night, Celeste waited until we were getting ready for bed before she spoke. Her voice was small, almost childlike. I need to tell you something. I stopped folding laundry and looked at her. I downplayed your work to my family. On purpose. She wouldn't meet my eyes. After we got married, they kept asking why you weren't more ambitious, why you didn't work for my father's firm, why you seemed content with such a small life. It was easier to let them believe you weren't capable of more than to constantly defend choices they'd never respect. I sat down on the edge of the bed. You were embarrassed by me. No, I was embarrassed by them. By their judgment. And I didn't want to be the less impressive spouse. I liked that they saw me as the one who had it together, the one who made the smart choice even if my husband wasn't impressive. She finally looked at me, tears in her eyes. I let them think you needed me more than I needed you. And I think I started believing it too. The betrayal hit deeper than her silence ever had. Because silence could be cowardice. But this was active participation in my diminishment. She hadn't just failed to defend me. She'd helped them tear me down. Did you ever actually believe in me? Yes. She didn't answer. That was answer enough. A week later I got a call from Patricia Reeves at the bank. Her tone was clipped, professional in a way that signaled trouble. Mr. Colwood, we had an unusual situation today. Someone contacted our office claiming to act on your behalf. A Mr. Julian Laurent. He requested information about your account and attempted to authorize certain transfers. My blood went cold. What? We flagged the attempt immediately as unauthorized. Your account is classified as requiring sole authorization. No one can act on your behalf without explicit written documentation, which he didn't have. I wanted to inform you right away. Thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Colwood, I should also mention that attempting to access someone else's financial information under false pretenses can have legal consequences. If you want to file a formal complaint, we can help facilitate that. Closed my eyes. Julian had crossed a line. Not just a family boundary but a legal one. He'd been so certain he had the right to my information, so convinced that anything connected to me must somehow belong to them, that he'd risked actual fraud. I'll think about it, I told Patricia. Thank you for protecting my account. After I hung up, I sat in my office for a long time. They weren't just dismissing me anymore. They were trying to take control. Trying to manage what I'd built as if it belonged to them simply because I'd married into their family. I needed to make something very clear very soon. The charity gala was one of those events where everyone who mattered in the city showed up to see and be seen. Vivian was on the board, so attendance was mandatory for the family. I wore my department store suit because I knew it would annoy her. Small rebellions were all I had left. Celeste stayed close to her mother all evening, whispering and laughing at inside jokes I wasn't part of. I stood near the bar, nursing a drink I didn't want, when I overheard two donors talking nearby. The Colwood analysis was spot on, one of them said. I followed his advice on those commercial properties, and my returns doubled. The other donor nodded. He's quiet about it, but the man knows what he's doing. Best financial mind I've encountered outside the major firms. I turned slightly and saw Vivian standing 3 feet away. She'd heard every word. Her champagne glass was frozen halfway to her lips, her smile locked in place like something painted on. Eyes met. For just a second the mask slipped. I saw confusion, then anger, then something that might have been fear. She'd built her entire view of me on the assumption that I was less than her family, less capable, less valuable. And now strangers were praising me in terms she'd never used for anyone, including her own children. Her smile cracked, just slightly, just enough. The next morning I received an email from my attorney. I'd hired him 6 months earlier for routine business matters, but he'd uncovered something interesting while reviewing old corporate filings. Adrian, you need to see this. There was an attempt 3 years ago to register Celeste as public representative of your investment entity. Filed by Vivian Lauren. You rejected it, but I found the paper trail. I opened the attached documents. There it was. A formal application to change the business registration, adding Celeste's name as the public face of my venture. Vivian had submitted it without my knowledge, probably assuming I'd never check or that I'd go along with it to keep the peace. But I'd caught it, and I'd blocked it, silently, without confrontation. Because even then, I'd known I couldn't trust them with what I was building. The rejection was dated and notarized. Legal proof that I'd protected my work from her interference years before the account had grown into something they wanted to claim. I forwarded the documents to my personal cloud storage. Then I printed a copy for my records. Evidence. Not for revenge. Just for truth. The next family dinner happened 3 weeks later. Vivian's invitation was pointed. We need to gather as a family, her message said. To reconnect. To remember what matters. I almost didn't go. But Celeste begged me, tears streaming down her face. Please, Adrian. Just one more dinner. For me. So I went. When I arrived, Vivian greeted me at the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Adrian, darling. Come in. We've saved you a special seat. The dining room table was set as elegantly as always. But this time, the seat at the head of the table was empty. Vivian gestured toward it. Please. As a sign of unity. Of family. I looked at that chair. At the power position she'd occupied for 40 years. At the symbol of authority she was offering me like a gift when we both knew it was strategy. I sat down. Everyone watched me. Celeste smiled hopefully. Julian looked uncomfortable. Preston, Celeste's father, stared at his plate. Then I spoke clearly. I'm filing for separation. The words landed like stones in still water. Ripples of shock spread across every face. Celeste went white. What? I'm filing for separation. I've already met with an attorney. The papers will be ready next week. Adrian, you can't, Vivian said, her voice sharp. This family isn't mine, I finished. It never was. Celeste followed me into the hallway, her heels clicking frantically against marble. Adrian, stop. Please. Turn. Her face was streaked with tears, her perfect makeup ruined. You can't do this. You can't embarrass me like this. Embarrass us. My family. Your family has spent 6 years treating me like I was nothing. And you let them. You helped them. I made mistakes. I know that. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can. Celeste, do you love me? Actually love me? Or do you love the idea of being married, of having someone who doesn't compete with you, who makes you look good by comparison? She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came. That's what I thought, I said quietly. Adrian, if you do this, if you leave, everyone will know. Everyone will talk. It will humiliate my family. I looked at her carefully. Even now, even at the end, she was worried about her family's image. Not our marriage. Not us. The embarrassment started long before the money did, I said. It started the first time your mother called me a charity case and you laughed along. It started every time I was the punchline and you stayed silent. I'm not ending this marriage, Celeste. It was never really there to begin with. I walked out. Behind me, I heard her sink to the floor, crying. But I didn't turn back. The next few weeks were chaos. News of the separation spread through Vivian's social circle like wildfire. Suddenly, people who'd ignored me for years wanted to know my side of the story. At a business luncheon, I overheard two of Vivian's longtime friends talking near the buffet line. Did you hear? Adrian Colwood is the one with the money. Not Celeste. Not the Lawrence. Him. I always thought there was something off about how Vivian talked about him. Like she was trying too hard to put him down. Makes you wonder what else she's been wrong about. The whispers reached Vivian. They had to. 'Cause 3 days later she called me. Her voice was different. Muller. Adrian, I think we need to talk. Really talk. About how I may have misjudged certain situations. What situations? Asked, keeping my tone neutral. Your capabilities. Your contributions. I may have been too quick to dismiss your work. You publicly mocked my business for 4 years, Vivian. Silence. Then quieter. I was protecting my daughter. From what? From being married to someone successful. From having a husband who didn't need her family's approval. From being overshadowed. The admission came out strangled. I didn't want her to feel less than. The way I felt less than my own husband for so many years. For a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. That's not my burden to carry, I said. Then I hung up. My attorney arranged a meeting to discuss asset division. Celeste brought Julian and Vivian. Came alone. The conference room was cold, institutional. We sat on opposite sides of a long table. I'm willing to be fair, I said. The house we split. Shared assets we divide. But my business, my accounts, my investments, those remain entirely mine. That's not reasonable. Julian jumped in immediately. You built those during your marriage. Celeste has a claim. My attorney slid a folder across the table. Mr. Colwood's business was established before the marriage. All growth occurred through his labor and capital alone. Mrs. Colwood has no legal claim to those assets. Vivian's face went red. This is ridiculous. You wouldn't have had the stability to build anything without this family's support. I looked at her calmly. What support? The constant mockery. The jokes about my education. The suggestions that I was too incompetent to manage my own finances. That kind of support. We gave you access to opportunities, she insisted. No, you gave me access to humiliation. There's a difference. I outlined the account classifications clearly. Not to brag. Not to gloat. Just to establish the truth. The venture capital fund. The commercial properties. The advisory role that had generated 6 figures in consulting fees over the past 2 years. All of it mine. All of it built while they'd laughed. I won't merge assets, I said firmly. I won't be managed. And I won't pretend anymore that I needed you. 2 months later, Julian's attempt to access my bank account reached his professional circles. Word traveled fast in finance. I heard through a mutual contact that 3 business opportunities had quietly disappeared for him. Partnerships that suddenly went cold. Deals that fell through at the last minute. Nobody wanted to work with someone who tried to commit fraud, even if it was family fraud. Trust was currency in our world, and Julian had spent his recklessly. He called me once, his voice tight with barely contained rage. You destroyed my reputation. No, I said calmly. You destroyed your reputation when you tried to access my account illegally. I just didn't cover for you. We're family. No, Julian. You made it very clear over 6 years that I was never really family. I was just the mistake your sister made that you all had to tolerate. He hung up without another word. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I just felt tired. Tired of fighting people who should have been on my side from the beginning. Celeste asked to meet me at a coffee shop near our old house. She looked different. Smaller. Less polished. Like the armor she'd always worn around her family had finally cracked. "I need to tell you something," she said. "I believed you needed my family's approval to matter. I thought that without their validation, without their world, you'd just be ordinary. And I didn't want to be married to ordinary." I stirred my coffee slowly. "And now I realize that needing approval was the only thing you ever outgrew. And I never did." Her voice broke. "I'm still trapped in their world, still desperate to prove I'm worth something to them. But you walked away like it was easy." "It wasn't easy," I said. "It was necessary." She nodded, tears falling onto the table. "I'm sorry. For all of it. For letting them treat you that way. For treating you that way myself. For not seeing who you really were until it was too late." "I appreciate that," I said. And I meant it. But apologies didn't erase years of betrayal. They didn't rebuild trust that had crumbled into dust. "Is there any chance?" she started. "No," I said gently. "There isn't." She cried quietly. I sat with her until she was done, then paid for both our coffees and left. Vivian's last attempt came through a letter delivered to my attorney's office. Handwritten. Personal. A final effort to rewrite the narrative. "Dear Adrian, I've had time to reflect on my behavior over the years. I want you to know that I always pushed you because I saw potential. I believe that pressure creates excellence. I may have been too harsh, but my intentions were always to help you succeed." I read the letter twice. Then I wrote a response. "Vivian, you didn't push me to succeed. You mocked me when I tried. You dismissed my work as cute ambition. You told Celeste I was a charity case. You tried to take control of my business without my knowledge. Those aren't the actions of someone who believed in me. Those are the actions of someone who wanted me to fail so you could stay superior. I don't need your retroactive approval. I never did. The only thing I needed was for you to treat me with basic respect. You couldn't manage that. Don't rewrite history now that it's convenient." I didn't send the letter. I just kept it in a drawer. Sometimes the best response is silence. The separation became final 6 months after that dinner. No drama. No courtroom theatrics. Just signatures on paper and a quiet division of the life we'd tried to build. Kept the business. Celeste kept the house. We split savings down the middle. It was fair. Clinical. The kind of ending that felt less like closure and more like just stopping. My attorney shook my hand afterward. "You handled this with remarkable dignity." I wasn't sure dignity was the right word. Maybe it was just exhaustion. Maybe it was the realization that fighting for something that never existed was pointless. I walked out of that office into bright sunlight, carrying nothing but a folder of documents and the knowledge that I'd finally stopped trying to be enough for people who decided I never would be. Felt strange. Not triumphant. Not sad. Just quiet. Like finally putting down a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten what my shoulders felt like without it. A year passed. Then another. I heard through occasional mutual contacts that the Laurent family had quietly restructured. Vivian had stepped back from some of her social obligations. Julian had moved to another city for a fresh start. Celeste had started therapy. People ask me sometimes if I kept in touch with them. I didn't. There was nothing left to say. My business continued growing. I took on consulting projects that interested me, turned down ones that didn't. I bought a small apartment downtown with a view of the river. I dated occasionally, casually, never looking for anything serious. I ran into Celeste once at a bookstore. We made polite small talk. She looked healthier, more herself than she'd ever looked when we were married. She mentioned she was seeing someone new, someone outside her family's circle. "I'm glad," I said. And I meant it. "Are you happy?" she asked. Thought about it. "I'm peaceful." "That's better." We said goodbye. It felt final in a way the divorce papers never had. Sometimes late at night I think about that phrase. You married up. The insult that had haunted me for years. I didn't marry up. I didn't marry down. I married into a family that mistook noise for power and silence for weakness. They believed that wealth meant worth, that pedigree meant competence, that their approval was the only currency that mattered. They were wrong. The account the bank addressed to me wasn't just money. It was proof that quiet work matters. That building something real beats performing something impressive. That you don't need approval from people who've already decided you're not enough. I spent years trying to earn their respect. Years shrinking myself to fit their expectations. Years believing that maybe if I just tried harder they'd finally see me. But the truth is simpler. People who want to see you will see you. People who don't won't. No amount of achievement, no account balance, no success will change someone who's invested in believing you're less than. The bank addressed that envelope to me because I'd earned it. Because I'd built something worth recognizing. Not for them. For myself. And that, in the end, was the only validation that ever mattered. The phrase that once felt like a wound became something else. Reminder. Not of where I came from, but of where I'd always been going. Somewhere they could never reach. Somewhere they'd never think to look.